Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another Warhammer table talk. This one, and we're not going to be doing as much on the table today, but the table I'm using is a nice sturdy little desk, and talk about a whole bunch that's gone on recently. So recently I posted up a video talking about the Hypercrypt Legion and what I was going to, or Hypercrypt Legion, that I was going to be playing against Lane. And said, here's my draft, here are these things, this is what I'm thinking, this wasn't going to work. And at the end of it, received a ton of feedback and conversation amongst there. And about things that I could do, things that everything. But most importantly, there was two strong topics of conversation that came up in there. One of which was the fact that about the convergence of Dominion, and the other was about the Hypercrypt hyperphasing ability itself, and what people are ruling as far as frontline gaming, and how people are seeing this interpreted within the deeper core of the rules themselves. So within those conversations, there was a lot of information that got pulled in, and so I want to bring this video and put this together and see what I've seen and how this trend goes and where this has all come from. So just bringing all of it together, bringing all the research information together into one spot. So as always, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell, get notified on all the content we're bringing here, including the changes to my Hypercrypt lists that will be playing this week. And yeah, everything else that we bring you here on the channel, more Necron content, more just Warhammer, just coming out here and talking Warhammer. Hopefully soon I'm going to start trying to test going live so we can just hang out and chat some Warhammer with everybody. All right, so with that being said, let's get over and start into this news. So first topic is Steelers are going to the playoffs. So happy there. All right, moving on. So in the video, I had talked about running the Convergence of Dominion. And a friend of the channel, a supporter, said that can't do that. At first I was like, I really don't see it. I don't see it anywhere. And then while looking through some of the other stuff with Strategic Reserve, there it was. Plain type. Right in Strategic Rules. Fortifications can never be in Strategic Reserve. So Convergence is going back on the shelf. They may have a home in another list. It's not this list. So I was sad about that. I thought that that was how they were fixing the Convergence problem, since they kind of took that ability away and unfortunately missed it. But hey, you know what? I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the feedback. Once again, all of the comments and all of the conversation that has happened through this has been very polite, very spirited debate. And is some of, like, the smile on my face is I am absolutely elated by all this. I enjoy this. I enjoy having these conversations with other people who are passionate about this hobby and also are true supporters for the channel, to see us grow into something bigger than we could even hopefully imagine. And with that, you guys have been very supportive and pointing me in the right direction on a lot of stuff and seeing a lot of stuff. Now, with that being said, I do have some interesting points of view about these two topics, the two topics I want to talk about. And so one is Frontline Gaming's as an entity, as well as the Hypercrypt the Hypercrypt, I'm always going to call it Hypercrypt Legion hyperphasing ability. Now, before we move into all this and all this information, once again, thank you to everyone who has supported the channel and has given me this information and pointed me in this right direction. Thank you all. I cannot say it enough. For this video, we need to assume that the army is a 2,000 point army, because I'm going to say selecting 3 units, etc., etc. I'm going to say these things a lot. So we are going to assume that this is a strike force that you can select up to 3 units. And that's important for, just in case anything I say, just always assume that factor. Now, before we get into the Hypercrypt and what the FAQ says, we need to talk about what this FAQ and where it comes from. So in the conversations, a lot of conversation is brought up with Frontline Game, or FLG, and the FLG FAQ. A lot of letters there. So, what is it? What is Frontline Games realistically? Who are they? So, Frontline Game is a group and an organization that puts on some of the biggest tournaments in 40K, including the biggest event of the year, the Las Vegas Open. Now, for the Las Vegas Open, being as large of an event as this is, there are a lot of people who will be spending a lot of money, travel, hotel, entry, everything to go to this tournament. The guys at Frontline Games, like for those who don't know, a little bit of a history, Frontline Games really took a stand back when 40K did not have as regularly of updates and FAQs and erratas. And their FAQ that they put out was, it helped the game so much. Things like the psychic power invisibility that completely broke the game, or some of the scoring mechanics that made Eldar way, way overpowered in all the wrong ways. They were out there creating something that would allow players to enjoy the game while we were waiting for updates and be able to create this, try to create a more level playing field. Now, at this time, Frontline Games and their FAQ, they are TOs at their heart, realistically. And they're putting on one of the biggest events of the year, and with Las Vegas Open, which is in June. It's not currently right now. So with that, they have an FAQ that they put out. This is where, going up to the tournament, leading up to the event, players can ask questions, and certain questions get addressed into their FAQ. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely would. The way that I accessed it was by searching Facebook for LVO, the letters LVO, space FAQ 40K. This brings up an XLSX file that is definitely editable, but not by the player reading it. There are subsections at the top for each individual army, and you can go and scroll through here. And what is really nice about this is reading through it. The FAQ, this FAQ specifically for LVO and from Frontline Games, is an excellent tool for newer gamers to the hobby. And this becomes your third friend. So while you're learning the game with one of your buddies and you may be debating about certain rules, having a resource like this that is a public community is excellent. And I can't say enough appreciation for the guys at Frontline Gaming who put this effort in here. I mean, a lot of these guys have other full-time jobs as well, and they spend time creating this resource for everyone out there. With that being said, they are still creating this and doing this quickly. That means that not all the rulings will be 100% correct. You can see, and they know this by design. Like, you can see this within the design of this document, that even Frontline Gaming knows that they may say something on here, and then a week later, as things develop, they may change something. This may not be the exact ruling. It happens all the way through. Also, this is out here now to start preparing for an event in June. A lot of detail is being put into this, a lot of it, and it's really nice to see that they're doing this. This is a very, very valiant attempt to make the cleanest, fairest events possible. Now, with that being said, you have to take this with a grain of salt, because there are some things in here that you can probably read through and see over time may not exactly stick that way. And that's the first thing I want to bring up. So in this document, at the top, it's able to be selected that you can go to each individual faction. And the one that I noticed here, under Necrons. So if you're able to check out this the feed and you're looking at this, if you look under Necrons, they have a recently the updated change which is that happened on 1/2 of 24. And this is, can the Necron Hypercrypt Legion use Reanimation Crypt stratagem to add models to a unit while in reserve? The second sentence of the designer commentary disallows this, but the stratagem's intent, yeah, that was tough, seems to be allowing the player ignore the normal rules for adding models to a unit. Frontline Gaming's answer is no. So now let's take that for a second and hold on. Now look at the codex itself and what this goes. So the codex, the stratagem in question is Reanimation Crypts. This is a stratagem that you use in your command phase. You target is your Necron Warlord. For each of your Necron units in reserve, that reserves units Reanimation Protocol activate. So literally by the standpoint of the FAQ, this stratagem does absolutely nothing. There's nothing it does, because their FAQ says no, you cannot activate the reanimation protocols to do anything with them. The second sentence design comment disallows this, but the stratagem intent seems to be allowing players to ignore the normal rules for adding models to a unit. So this, I mean, I have to wonder if they're talking about like adding models to a unit and like increasing it past its starting strength, in that sense, or if there's some sort of misunderstanding on this, because literally the only purpose for the stratagem is to reanimate and reserve. Now, the other thing that catches me is it says the second sentence of the design commentary. Well, the reanimation protocol in the actual codex doesn't have a design commentary. There's an example, and there is a second sentence to the actual rule itself, which states, if your army is Necrons at the end of your command phase, each unit from your army with this ability that is on the battlefield activates its reanimation protocol. So I'm not seeing where where they're talking about the design commentary that disallows models to be added to a unit, unless they're trying to build out of the initial, the starting strength. But according to this, yes, reanimation protocol requires the unit to be on the table. However, this strat, literally, its only purpose is to reanimate in reserve, with the only cadence, in my understanding, the only cadence to be the unit is the warlord must be alive. Now, with this being said, at this time, this was just updated 1/2 of 2024. So this was just updated recently to say no, you cannot. This may be at this current time a FLG ruling. There might be something that they're looking at and thinking that's too much. You're not allowed to do that. And over time, we may see more development to it. But as far as I can see, that seems like it is a misinterpretation of the rules. Gladly start that conversation again, because I feel like after we start talking about the strategic reserve thing, that one comes more to a finite conclusion. But here is a prime example, though. Like if that FAQ stands, if we play with that FAQ as it stands, then the stratagem doesn't activate. Now, some of you may say, if we play as, and how could we not? In where I live, and in the tournament circuits that I am a part of, including Great Lakes Tournament Circuit and stuff, etc., we play off Games Workshop based FAQ and Games Workshop's the Game Workshop stylized rules and setup. So when you see the setup for the terrain and the placement and everything like that for my meta, the Great Lakes community, Ours is a Games Workshop based development. That's how we run things. So for us in our area and in our best practice, we are always going to base it off of what Games Workshop says, what the codex says, and then what the TOs in that Games Workshop group discuss. Now, Frontline Games does work with Games Workshop quite closely. So a lot of what they're saying does hold value and is, a like I said, this is a very good resource when you're learning the game, or if you don't know how to rule something. Having something like this is great. I personally have to disagree with the ruling on the Hypercrypt, the reanimation crypts, because according to this, then literally the stratagem would do absolutely nothing. Now, the wording and the way the question may be understood by whomever is answering this may believe that they're correct to say, no, you cannot do this based on the wording of the question. And as time goes on, we may see where they look back at that more and go, okay, this is a no, this is a yes. Maybe they'll allow the reanimation, but it's only going to be to heal units, whereas you cannot add models to units. I'm not exactly sure why or where that comes from and why that's a focus of not adding the models back into the unit, since that is the effective ability of the stratagem. I mean, it's the entire source of it and how it functions and what it does. So we'll start that debate though up in the comment section. So with it, but needless to say, let's move on to the full reason for this video entirely, and that is the hyperphasing ability. Now, this one is actually the Frontline Gaming actually taught me a lot into the order and how this is all going to work and how this functions. So let's go through how we got there. So first of all, with the hyperphasing, the big question comes down to the Necron player goes second. And if the Necron player goes second, that means that their opponent would go first and have an end phase, an end step. When that happens, the Necron player would then have the option to remove 3 units from the table and put into strategic reserve. And that's when things start getting weird. So when you put a unit in strategic reserve, it is a specified place. And that means that it has its own specific rules. And when I say that, it's because there is, when you look at strategic reserves in the main rule book, strategic reserves, it talks about rules that apply. And the one key cadence is this. Note that while all strategic reserve units are also technically reserve units, the reverse is not true. So what this means is that everything that you follow for the rules of strategic reserves is going to be consistent across the game. But units that are put in reserve are not strategic reserves. Strategic reserves are reserve units, but there are other subsects, such as deep strike. What that does, it starts to create a little bit of a time loop where some units are able to return immediately while other units could not, or so it may have seemed. So when we start looking at this, we have to bring into the conversation Death Watch Teleportarium Strat, the Grey Knight's teleport assault ability. Excuse me if I misspoke on that one, and the Ophidian's state-based ability. Now, all 3 of those abilities are worded the same way. You may pick a unit up at the end of your opponent's movement phase, and then during your next reinforcement step, place them back on the field using the typical deep strike 9-inch away type rules. Though usually not a deep strike in its own right. So that forces you to bring them back the next turn. The Necron's Hypercrypt Legion, however, does not. It puts them in strategic reserve. So now we got to dig deeper into this, into what does it mean to be that strategic reserve unit. Now, strategic reserve units, when they arrive, are allowed to elect if they want to arrive via deep strike using that ability or using the strategic ability to come on from a table edge. That is an option that these units can have. So from that point in that segment, it would say there hasn't been given any more information to state whether these units could actually come back on your first turn, entering in such ways just because you went second. And because of the location is once again strategic reserve. And strategic reserve has been limited to state that no unit may arrive from strategic reserve on the first game turn, regardless of location. So now that starts leaning into that sense. And I hear a lot of people have said and mentioned to me and directed me to the fact of deep strike being a specific area. And that's a lot of where LVO and FLG kind of go to. And we'll touch on that in a second. Now, with all that, we have the, whatchamacallit, let's go over into that. So the first thing is, when we look at we'll go into the number 50. Number 50 on the general questions. And there are 3 bullet points here. If a unit starts on the field, round 1, gets picked up into reserve, strategic or otherwise, and has either specific wording telling it to come back in the next reinforcement step or has deep strike, it can come back in battle round 1. Their answer is yes. Now, I don't understand what the stipulation really comes about deep strike and why deep strike is so specific for this. Because if you're putting a unit in strategic reserve, it's still in strategic reserve. I don't see what deep strike has to do to trigger an accelerated speed. But we'll come back to that. If a unit starts on the field round 1, gets picked up off the board, neither reserve nor strategic reserves, i.e. Veil of Darkness, relics and abilities like that, can it come back battle round 1? Answer is still yes. And those are ones that's one that we always assumed. Same as above, but can only come back battle round 1 if the unit being repositioned was put into reserves, not strategic reserves. And here is where it says, depends on the ability, most should be covered by number 1 and 2. So the ability puts them back and puts them in strategic. Strategic says you cannot arrive on turn 2, until turn 2. And we look at bullet point 1 for the FAQ. If a unit starts on the field round 1, gets picked up, goes into reserve, strategic or otherwise, and has specific wording telling it to come back the next round, or deep strike, Frontline Games has ruled it can. Again, I don't understand what the deep strike incentive is behind this and why deep strike pushes it so much. The only thing that I notice with deep strike is the fact that typically that is where it goes into a deep strike unit is a reserve unit, not a strategic reserve, but a reserve. And once again, it's the strategic reserves that specifically cannot come in turn 1, not the reserve units. But there is a stronger bullet point with this. Frontline Games also goes on to talk about point number 86. Can you use reserve up-down tricks to go up turn 1? What about go back down on turn 1? Their answer is yes, you can pull them up turn 1. They can only then be set up turn 1 if they have deep strike. So again, back to the deep strike, back to the unit having deep strike being the cadence that allows the unit to come back. And I still don't see it, and I still don't get what that is the cadence. However, everything I said, all my argument and everything is without reason, because the Leviathan packet, the little card that's in the Leviathan cards with the rules for Leviathan mission, once again has thwarted me. And this is where I am fully a believer more into it, except for the deep strike thing. And this is a little weird. This is a little weird, and I'm hoping that with the data slate updates that we may see this week, this might help clarify some of this. But if you go into that little card, and you go to section 8, the very last paragraph, reserve units cannot arrive during the first battle round, and any strategic reserves or other reserves that have not arrived on the battlefield by the end of the third battle round count as being destroyed, as are any units embarked within them. Parentheses. This does not apply to units that are placed into strategic reserve after the first battle round has started. So that right there, and I can this is where I can see where people are reading this, and this is one that I cannot. This is a as pure TO. I cannot differentiate between this, because based on the English language and how words work and how sentences work, reserve units arrive during the first battle round of any strategic reserves, or reserves that have not arrived on the battlefield by the end of the third battle round count as having been destroyed, comma, as are any units embarked within them. Parentheses. Stop there. There was no period. There was no stopping point. There was no transition from one thought to another. So to me, the comma is only to signify, like, you could change it up and say any units embarked within transports, comma, that have not arrived by the third battle round count as being destroyed. But at the same time, too, that a beginning part of reserves units cannot arrive during the first battle round, there's no period, no end. It's and any strategic reserve. It's as if this is all coupled into one, and that this entire thought is one thought. And this is the answer. This is realistically the point where I will completely yield the argument and say, okay, the Necron Hypercrypt Legion can effectively enter on the first battle round until otherwise stated by Games Workshop that they cannot. So the Hypercrypt units that you pick up off the table on turn 1 when you go second can in fact arrive the next turn. The question I have right now is, why is there so much focus around Deep Strike? Why is it so significant that the unit has Deep Strike? Because by following the Leviathan pack, reading this and reading the little snippet, to me, that means that any unit I pick up off the table, strategic, deep strike, non-deep strike anyways, can return that next battle round. The only thing that I can think that would possibly stop strategic reserve units from being placed that don't have deep strike, and I think this is the critical point. Now, as I say it, I think I get it. Okay, yes, I understand it. So, strategic reserves have a very specific way that they're able to be placed. And the way that they are able to be placed is from the table edge. So, how is a unit placed from a table edge on turn 1? Tell me that rule. There is none. There is a rule on how to place the unit starting turn 2. There is a rule to how to place the unit from turn 3 and further. But there is not one for turn 1. So because there is no way that that unit can be placed on turn 1 by any legal ruling, because there's no table edge they can be placed from on turn 1, that is the reason that it is so specific around Deep Strike. Because Deep Strike is the only one that does not have any significant reasoning that it can be placed on 1. So this is, I can completely see now, assuming the fact that this last paragraph of this does not apply to units that are placed into strategic reserve after the first battle round has started, assuming that is for the entire piece. And that's how Frontline Games has ruled it. That is how Frontline Games is reading it, is that this is one entire piece. And you know what? Based on English language, based on no periods, I agree. I agree 100% with that yes, as long as the unit has deep strike, it can enter on turn 1 because it has a rule that allows it to. The reason standard strategic units cannot is because there is no rule on how to place them. there's nothing you can do with them. There's no way to do it. You can pick them up, but unless they have deep strike, they're stuck off the table until your turn 2, because that's the only time that they have a timestamp to re-enter the field. So this helps with the Hypercrypt Legion. It definitely helps a lot. And that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed going through all of the segments of it. Hopefully that was easy to follow, and hopefully that helped give kind of an understanding on how Frontline Games is interpreting this and why they see it and why it does work that way. It definitely helped me. It definitely helped me a lot to be able to see that and really go into this. Again, thank you to all the community for helping me get to those resources and figure that out. But in a nutshell, I give that the thumbs up. I give that an agreement. I see that now. And up until like I kept saying, like, man, I don't understand the deep strike. I don't understand the deep strike. And then it just dawned on me, it's because there's no other rule to do it. So even in creating this, it's like it helps me to understand that I come to that conclusion and realize that's where this is going. And this is important because this is not going to be the end of this ability. This ability is going to pop up in other armies, and we're going to see it multiple times. So starting to look into this now will be better for the future. But again, to still state, though, I do feel like the ruling on the reanimation crypt stratagem, I think that kind of needs to be reread and reviewed, because right now, according to them, this is useless. Now, I also have seen for some other very large, very major events where they have made rulings on things and said, this is only for this event. This is a rule that we have for this event, and that's it, specifically. I can get behind that. If I went to a game that was using the LVO or using Frontline's FAQ, or using a different FAQ of any sorts, or had their own personal FAQ, okay, that's what we're going with. That's how we're playing it this weekend. As long as you have it out with enough time for players to be able to adjust their rosters accordingly to it, I'm perfectly fine. This game gets crazy. It gets really crazy. And any semblance of organization really helps in the long run. So I do have to give it up for the guys over at Frontline Games. You know, they are definitely, trying to, this is for the community. This is, I access this for free. So this is definitely built for the community and really will help, not only for their events, but help you in your home events to understand more of what's going on in 40K and looking into these things and asking why. You look at this and go, how? How do you see that? How are you believing that? How do you think that that works that way? And then when you start going through everything and putting the pieces together, the community helping me greatly with it and putting it together, you go, wow, that's really deep. That's really deep. And it gives you a completely new respect for the complexity of 40K if you didn't already have one. Hopefully this helps some people out. I really did enjoy this every conversation that I had with everybody. Thank you. Shout outs to everyone in the comments section for all the support, and shout outs to just everyone, all the subscribers on the channel, and all the growth that we've had so far. Hopefully in the future, I can start working more with some of the technology and be able to do this live and put these images up there and talk about them live and start to build towards that, because this is a lot of the fun that I really have with 40K, is having these spirited debates that can be friendly. I mean, at the end of the day, we're playing toy soldiers on a table. There shouldn't be anything too serious about it, right? Well, guys, I appreciate everything we do here. And don't take me wrong way. I take my Warhammer very, very, very seriously. But no reason to shame anyone over it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for helping me out, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.